Just a note that this podcast may touch on difficult themes and include some challenging conversations, so please take care when listening. This is The Widow Diaries, a podcast that holds space for the often unspoken stories of grief, love and life after loss as a young widow. I'm Caroline Winter, and like so many, I've been on this journey. So come with me each episode and hear from others who've also walked the winding path of widowhood in their own way. The Widow Diaries, for First Light Widowed support, where no story is the same and every story matters. Now, I like to think I'm a better version of myself after losing my husband, Richard. Not because I wasn't a good person before, but because being widowed changes you, sometimes in the biggest of ways, sometimes in the smallest. My family used to joke that I wore rose-coloured glasses, and they were right. Not to say that I'm any less optimistic now than I was BR before Richard, but if pragmatic had a colour, then my glasses would definitely have shades of that too. And that's a good thing, because being more realistic has also given me the gift of clarity. And clarity, change and pragmatism are just some of the things I delve into with my guest this episode. Claire Scoles brings humour, honesty and a deep understanding of life's fragility to everything she shares. She's a registered nurse, a wife and a mum who, after losing her husband Chris, found a way to honour his life, navigate their blended family and open her heart again to love and all that comes with it. Claire, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Can you take us back and tell us a little bit about your life before you lost Chris? So what was your relationship like and what did your day-to-day life look like?
If I had to put it into one word, I would say chaos in a good way. Chris and I were a blended family and we had 5 children between us. So the day-to-day living that we had was pure and utter chaos. There was soccer training, there was gymnastics, there was coaching, there was school uniforms and lunches and excursions and all the things that come along with having 5 school-age children. So, yeah, chaos, I think, would be the word that we would describe it. And Chris also ran his own business. So he was quite often working from home and doing late nights at the computer. And, yeah, for anyone who has children, they will recognise that it's a busy, busy time.
Absolutely. That sounds like a fabulous chaos. Can you take us back a bit further how you met Chris and became this blended family?
We became this blended family in 2013-14. We actually met during the demise of our previous marriages, and we had both taken on fitness, as you do when your marriage is ending and you're trying to gain some control over your life. And for whatever reason, both of us had joined a triathlon club. So given that neither of us are very good swimmers, it's an odd choice, really. And perhaps that's where we bonded in the pool, because we would quite often get separated off to a lane for fear of our own safety, I think, because we were both a bit rubbish. But nonetheless, we persisted and we kind of bonded over that and became really good friends and sort of chatted about what was going on in our personal lives and, shared some things about our family. And yeah, it's sort of hard to pinpoint when that became sort of more than friends. But yeah, all of a sudden we were talking about buying a house together or building a house, which we ended up doing, and combining our family. So yeah.
Wow. Now, I have read that you've described your family as not your average family, and you've explained it as a bit of chaos. But what was it like building a blended family together with young children?
It's really difficult. It is really difficult. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Step families are hard work, regardless of how in love and how much you are committed to each other. For anyone out there, and I'm sure there's a lot of people out there, widowed or not, trying to blend families and custody agreements and differing rules and outlooks on parenting and shared responsibilities and finances and all of that. It's really difficult, but I think if you can survive that as a couple, you can pretty much survive anything. Chris and I were always very committed to ourselves. We looked after ourselves and our health and our fitness, and we both valued that, so we supported each other. Chris supported me through running 2 marathons. I supported him by he completed 2 half Ironman competitions, and that requires that give and take. Someone's on the sideline with 5 children while the other person is doing, completing their physical goals, but that sort of builds you up as a person. And when you bring, I think, your whole person to a relationship, then the rest is a bit easier. We also were very good at prioritising our relationship. We had regular date nights. It was quite the feat of organisation to get babysitters and whatnot, but we made the effort because it was worth it, and we had weekends away, and we stole, nights here and there away from the children. So I think that's really important, but I won't sugarcoat it. It is really, really difficult.
Those little moments that you talk about, that's a recipe for a great relationship, I think, regardless of who you are. And tell us about Chris. What was he like?
Chris was an accountant. That should tell you a lot about what you need to know. Chris was also born and raised in England. I was born and raised in Scotland, so there was a healthy bit of,
Braveheart rivalry.
Yeah, there was a little bit there. But we should have shared a similar background, history and humour. So both incredibly black sense of humour. And I'm a nurse as well, so for any nurses out there will understand that. So I think we bonded over that, and we shared a lot of things around that for the two of us. But he was very rules oriented. That was the accountant in him. Chris was a very proud man, and he took a lot of pride in his work. So he ran a successful business, and that meant a lot to him. The looking after his clients, looking after his friends, succeeding at things meant a lot to him. He loved his family. His kids were his absolute world. So Chris had 3 children. I brought 2 to the group of 5. And having his own business, he was able to take time off, and he went to sports days, he went to under-8s days, he went to carnivals, and he was a coach on his middle son's soccer team as well. So despite the long hours, and he always put time aside for his children. He went to a One Direction concert.
Oh, wow. Any
dad who takes his, I think Diamond was maybe about 9 or 10 at the time, and he took her to a One Direction concert. So that's dedication.
Absolutely is. Thank you. It's lovely to get a sense of who Chris was. You mentioned, fitness and health being at the centre of both of you as individuals, but as part of your relationship as well. Take us back to when Chris was diagnosed with his tumour and how that thought process unfolded for both of you, particularly in light of the fact that you had such a focus on your health and were mindful of your bodies.
Yeah, we did. I mean, by no means were we elite athletes, but we certainly, health and fitness was part of what we did. And it was actually, he had been complaining a little bit about, some tiredness and just not feeling 100% and that sort of thing. And of course, once you're in your 40s, it feels like if you went to the doctor every time you felt a bit tired, you pretty much should move in there. And it's hard to sort of know. But one day I remember we were out for a run together, and I am 5'1", maybe at a pinch with shoes on. Chris was 6'4". So when we went out for a run, one, of course, I had 2 steps to his every one, so it was quite easy for him to go quite a bit faster than me. And on this particular day, he was lagging behind a little bit, so of course I was taking great delight in that, until he said, "Oh, my chest really hurts." And of course, I'm a nurse. That's do not pass go, do not collect $200. You're a middle-aged man running and you're experiencing chest pain. So I immediately made him go to the doctors, and they were convinced it was sort of chest in origin. I think they got a bit sort of distracted by those set of symptoms, and they did the usual stress test and echoes and those sorts of things, and they found that no, there wasn't anything wrong with his heart. He complained that he was still having this discomfort, and so they put it down to heartburn at that point. He continued on with sort of treatment for heartburn, and I think Chris was representative of a lot of people in this generation where you don't question doctors. You know, if the doctor says, well, that's what's wrong with you, you go, thank you very much. I won't waste any of your time. I'll take the medicine and I'll go on my way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely, it does.
Whereas me being a nurse, I was a little bit more, no, you're allowed to say, I'm not happy with that. And we sort of got into a couple of arguments about it. It was almost like terrible to say, I didn't trust him to go to the doctors and say the right things. You know, I would sort of interrogate him. But did you tell them that you were tired? And did you tell them that you've all of this? And he was like, yeah. And part of me just didn't believe that he was doing it right. Does that make sense?
It does.
And I have spoken to widows who in the, aftermath have sort of had to reconcile with that. And so I continued to push. He wasn't getting any better. And it was over Christmas time. You can imagine Christmas Day, 5 kids. It was all a bit of a nightmare day, and I was on a complete mission, and he went for a lie down. And I thought, how bloody dare you? Here I am.
Slogging away.
Yeah, absolutely. Doing all this while you just go and have a nap. But afterwards I thought about it and I thought, that's not right. No matter how tired he is, going for a nap.
That was out of character for you.
It really was, yeah. And so again, I started with the nagging. And he had some blood tests, and they were within the realms of normal but trending. And I was trying to explain to him what that meant. He really didn't want to have a bar of it. The doctor says, I'm fine. I don't know what you're going on about. And I said, look, I'm just really not happy with this. Go to a different doctor. So he went to a different doctor, and they said, all right, we'll send you for gastroscopy. So camera down the throat to have a look, and we'll do a colonoscopy while we're at it. So, actually he'd had a colonoscopy earlier in the sort of workup, and that had been all fine. So they didn't do a gastroscopy then. So they agreed to write a referral for a gastroscopy, and he did the right thing, and he rung the specialist, and they said, oh yeah, we can fit you in like 4 months. Okay. And he came home feeling very proud of himself that he'd done the right thing, and look, here, I've done that. And I said, nah, not good enough. So I did something I've never done as a nurse, and I called in a favour. So I'm an operating theatre nurse, and I spoke to one of my surgeons, and he said, Claire, bring him in on Thursday.
Wow.
So I dropped him off at the hospital, quickly ran back to ferry whatever kids needed to go to school, and he was supposed to be last on the list, but the surgeon had come out and made him first on the list, and I found out later because of how awful he actually looked. I didn't even get back from dropping the children off, and the surgeon had rung me and he said, Claire, you need to come in now. And I felt so privileged in that moment. I must admit, not many people get that, to be ushered straight in. And also the surgeon's wife was the anaesthetist, and I know her as well. And they brought me into a room and gave me a glass of water, and he immediately pulled up the pictures from the scope. And he said, now, Claire, I normally deal with the other end, but what I've seen with the camera here, I don't know what it is, but I know that it's not good. And Chris was still in recovery at that point. And he said, I've taken some biopsies. I'm sending him down for a CT immediately now. I want you both in my office at 6:30 tomorrow morning. I'll come in and we'll have a chat. And that's when your world just falls out.
Absolutely.
It really does. It just falls out in that moment.
As a nurse and having, I guess, the knowledge that you do, what were you thinking at that stage, and what conversation did you have with Chris in those hours before that meeting at 6:30 the next morning?
I think you go into like a self-preservation mode. You don't want to believe the worst. And I think I wanted to protect him a little bit. I wanted to keep that hope. He very much took on this warrior, it's going to be, something we have to fight, but we're going to be fine. We're going to fight it. We'll do what it takes. Because at that stage we didn't know the extent of it. And I remember that evening, and we didn't pretend like it didn't exist. We didn't tell anyone. We sort of kept it in our own little bubble. I didn't sleep a wink, obviously, that night. Until we got into the office that next morning. And it's funny, and I know people will relate to the strange parts about those moments that you remember. I remember there being no one else there, that he'd opened the office and had to turn on the lights just for us. And my brain was going, that's not good. Anything to do medical, if it's not bad, it can wait. If it's bad, it needs to be immediately. And we went into his office, and he had actually brought in the consultant gastro surgeon from the major, from the Royal Brisbane Hospital in as well, who was also a surgeon that I knew. And these are both sort of big guys, big gregarious sort of guys that I'd worked with. And they stood there, and I'll never forget the looks on their faces. And I don't think Chris had that gravity again, because he would have experienced it very differently. He thought this was just very nice treatment because I knew these guys, I worked with them, and he thought, and immediately he just pulled the computer screen up and he turned it towards me, and he said, Claire, it's stage 4. And the one thing I remember him saying was, we can't operate. Now, if anyone knows anything about surgeons, they'll operate on anything. Because my immediate thing was, well, I've got the best in the business here. Let's get this out. Let's cut it out. I know how hard it is, but I know we can do it. And I think he preempted that, and he said, we can't operate. And I looked over at Chris, and he was just confused, and I let the doctor explain to him, and he fainted. He just fell straight on the floor.
The shock of it.
The absolute shock. He just fell on the floor, and I just remember running over to sort of the floor and sort of just holding on to him and looking up and seeing these two surgeons in tears, and one of them had to leave the room.
Oh, gosh.
And I just looked and I said, how do you do this? How do you do this for a job? And he said, it's different, Claire, it's different when you know somebody.
That's the hugest news anyone can receive. And as you say, many will relate, sadly, to what you've been through, and Chris as well. From that moment, how did life change for you both and the family?
I think I could describe in one word would be clarity. It feels like in that moment, and I've read over some of my journals preparing to talk to you today, and it was really interesting how clear everything became in that moment. The things that I was worried about at 3 p.m. 2 days before, just insignificant crap, about what to have for dinner and who ate the last yogurt, and don't put your clothes on the floor. And I know we get caught up in that. I'm not saying we shouldn't, but all of that it just doesn't matter at all. and you become so laser acutely focused on, it's almost like this strange gift that you get given in that moment about the things that actually matter. And it's about people, and it's about being with people and supporting people. And the rest of that shit just takes care of itself. It really does. I remember the doctor saying to Chris, "You'll never go back to work." And for someone who based a lot of his value, a lot of his worth on his work, that was completely devastating. Mm-hmm. But in the same moment, I could see that clarity for him in that it doesn't matter. And he never did. He never set foot in his office ever again after that moment. I remember going out into the hallway and calling his office manager and telling her and saying, "I don't know what it is that you have to do. I will give you all the passwords, but you have to run this show now. I don't know what this is going to look like, but Chris isn't coming back." So I put a lot onto her shoulders on that day, but she handled it. And yeah, you then have to go through that horrible process of telling family, telling the kids, figuring out what next.
And so how did you tell the kids? How did they take it?
I did it in two ways. I took my two kids separately to their dads, and I told them with their dad, and then I left them there for overnight. And then we came home and gathered. Eden would have been about 9 or 10, and Diamond was that 12, 13 age. So they would have taken it very differently, that concept of never getting better, of death. It's not something they'd had to deal with. And we sat on the couch and we just told them straight. Neither of us are religious. We don't believe in, I don't want to use the word sugarcoating, because we certainly didn't, sledgehammer them, but we were certainly very pragmatic about what this would look like. And they had questions around school and the obvious things that, kids are concerned about and things like that. So, but just a devastating blow. I think it was harder looking back on that moment than it was being in that moment. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, but you're in sort of an autopilot, aren't you? You're in shock. You're just doing the things you need to do at the time. So
absolutely,
that does make sense. Can I ask, was there a prognosis given in terms of time? And so if sort of knew how long and what you might do with that, how you might spend that time? Chris
did ask that question of the doctors. He said, how long have I got? And I remember it was diagnosed in May, around that May Day weekend. And I remember the doctor saying, "You will be lucky to see Christmas." And in fact, he didn't make it anywhere near Christmas. He passed away at the beginning of October of that same year. So it was 5 months from diagnosis to death. Wow. So it was a very short period of time. And I don't think in the first instance you think, how am I going to live out this time? Like they say, "Oh, what would you do if the doctor told you had 6 months to live?" Some people say, "Oh, I would fly here and I would do that." And it's very different when it actually happens to you. Those things don't matter. Holding the people that you love the most close to you is what matters the most. And there's a lot to do. I don't think people appreciate the life admin that's involved in a terminal diagnosis. There's life as such still goes on. Bills still need to be paid. There's jobs. There's wills that have to be written. There's, all of these horrific things. And we were also undergoing palliative chemotherapy just to try and, slow it down a little bit to buy us some quality time. So we were spending time having chemotherapy and doing all those sorts of things. As well in the midst of it. So 5 months, it was not a long time.
You mentioned the word palliative therapy there. What role did palliative care play for Chris and your family when he was going through this?
In the first instance, I think we're sort of thrown into the bubble of treatment, and despite knowing that it's palliative treatment, you're still in a chemotherapy infusion unit with people who are being treated. So, you know, it's not a joyous place to be, a cancer day treatment area, but you make the most of it. You bond with people, you bond with the nursing staff. But whilst we were receiving palliative chemotherapy, it was still treated as almost like an active treatment. So we were still going for scans and seeing how it had progressed. And all the while, I just couldn't reconcile that in my head because I thought, I'm very much a pragmatist and I'm a scientist and I'm a nurse. And I thought, why are we testing for things when it doesn't matter? It's not going to change. Why are we wasting time? They wanted to do clinical trials. And I thought, well, I feel like you're just using us for that because we know that there's no miracle treatment here. But a couple of those things gave Chris a bit of hope, which was nice. So, you know, we went along with it. But I found it very, very difficult, even working within the health system, to navigate that journey between active treatment and into the palliative care space. I thought that was unnecessarily difficult, and I had to really, really advocate strongly for mine and Chris's wishes, and I think that could be done a lot better in our system. So we were never offered palliative care. I had to sort of bring it up. I had to request it. And don't get me wrong, when we got onto the palliative care, onto the books, they were amazing. But bridging that gap and getting there was more difficult than it should have to be for a family that's going through what they are going through. But once we got that treatment, it was great. We really had all of our wishes, and because Chris didn't want to be in hospital, he wanted to die at home, so we were able to do that for him.
Amid all of this, you actually did have one last holiday, didn't you? What happened? What happened on that holiday? Because it's pretty special.
It was. So we managed to, I think it must have been July, I think. So yeah, diagnosed in May, and then we decided to take a trip, and we decided on New Zealand mainly because of the reciprocal health rights. Very romantic. But the pragmatist in me is thinking, oh my God, what if something happens?
Yeah,
you know, I don't want to be stranded in some foreign country and unable to get him home or something like that. So we decided to do a bucket list trip to New Zealand, and it was, let's just put it this way, we didn't worry about how much it was. So
good for you.
we booked into this absolutely incredible resort, which is like something out of an absolute fairy tale. People have their helicopters, you know, landing them there. It was absolutely incredible. You know, we had our private sommelier. You know, Chris just knows wine is it's red or it's white. So we had this guy making us cocktails. So it really was an out of this world experience. But we had also decided we wanted to see Milford Sound, but it's a pretty hectic kind of a bus trip there. So I said, oh, well, you know what, stuff it. Let's get a helicopter there. And he's like, what? You know, he's trying to get him out of that accountant.
Yes.
But that'll be, and I'm like, just, you know, don't worry about it. We'll get the helicopter there. So we got up early in the morning and we went and they said, oh, the weather's not quite right at the moment. And he seemed a bit agitated about that. And I was like, it's fine, you know, it'll clear and we'll get on. And they gave us a call and they were like, yep, the helicopter's good to go now. And off we went. I'd never been in a helicopter before. It was incredible. July over the snow-capped mountains and whatnot, and if you're lucky, they will land on top of a glacier for you to take pictures. So where we land on this glacier and it's just incredible. So I jump out like a kid on Christmas morning and I run over and I'm screaming like, oh my God, look over here, look over here. And I turn around and Chris is down on one knee and he proposed on top of a glacier. So
oh my gosh.
You can't beat that. That's pretty good.
Oh my, you cannot. I just literally just got goosebumps. That was amazing.
It was incredible. So and it's interesting, as I just recount that. He was wearing a black puffer jacket, and of course I buried my head into his chest crying and saying yes. And recently when I was unpacking some things and I got that puffer jacket, my lip imprint is still on the front of that puffer jacket.
Those things matter so much.
Yeah, it is. It's incredible. So it made it a really beautiful trip to celebrate that and celebrate our engagement, because we had just sort of thought we wouldn't get married again. You know, we had a house, we had the 5 kids, we had a mortgage together. We didn't need to spend money on a wedding. But like I said, that clarity that comes with what's important, and it was important for him to die as, you know, my husband. So
and so you did marry, obviously, then.
So we did. We got home, and it was such a lovely distraction to plan, albeit a short and sweet sort of wedding, but it was a beautiful, positive thing to do in amongst all of the horribly depressing things that you have to do. So we were very lucky, and that energy sort of brought some beautiful people into our lives. We touched base with an amazing celebrant who I still speak with to this day. She's amazing. And a photographer who, you know, is booked up 3 years in advance, and he found time and actually donated his time to photograph our wedding, and gave us some absolutely amazing pictures of the children on that day. So it was incredible. And we had planned for the day to be, I think I want to say it was the 23rd or the 26th of September. But his health really started to deteriorate into August when we got back, and it was quite quick. And towards the end of August, beginning of September, even more worse. And we sort of started to think perhaps, you know, the withdrawal of the treatment. And I remember going to one of the chemotherapy sessions, and all of the nurses there were, you know, they're all joking. They wanted to be our bridesmaids, and we had a particularly good nurse manager there, very matronly, and she pulled me aside and she said, "Claire, I'm going to tell you this straight. He's not going to make it till that date. You need to get married this weekend."
Oh, that's a sobering moment.
But I'm so grateful for that honesty and that courage that she had as a nurse. Like, I think about that myself. Would I have that courage to say that to a patient who is just living on cloud 9 at the moment? But I'm so very grateful that she did. And we ended up calling my best friend. She lives in Stanthorpe. And we said, change of plan, we're getting married tomorrow morning at home. And Chris was like, "But what about this? But what about that?" It doesn't matter. And we coined this phrase, "All you need is love." And our beautiful celebrant, because she was so organised, she knew that this might happen. She had all the paperwork ready to go, and she had a wedding to do, you know, first thing that next morning. And she said, "But that's fine. I'll be finished by 11. I could be at your place by 12.
Wow.
And she was, awesome. and the photographer came as well. So, and it was just us. It was my best friend. It was Chris's friend, and my mum. She grabbed some flowers at the servo on her way over, and I had my wedding dress, and everything was ready, and we just got married on our back deck, and we had the most just beautiful, heartfelt, just us. Like, all we really did was say our vows, and we were legally married then. And Chris's health did continue to deteriorate. He did thankfully make it until the original date, and we did have all of our friends and family, and I got to put my dress on again.
Nice.
And we explained to everybody that we had already been legally married, but we went through with the ceremony, and it was such a beautiful thing for Chris. It was like his living wake. He got to say goodbye to everybody, and it was really, really beautiful for that.
And it wasn't long after that he passed away, was it?
It wasn't. It really wasn't. I think we came home that night from that wedding, and he never left the house again. So that was the end of September, and he passed away on the 5th of October.
It's an incredible story, as are all of ours, you know, whatever form they take. But I think particularly when someone is unwell for a period of time, and then that moment when they do die, and there's so much that comes with that, you know, the emotion, the everything that's led to that moment, and then everything that's going to come after that moment.
Absolutely.
Can you sort of talk me through how you navigated those sort of early weeks and months, particularly with the children? You were a mother and a stepmother. You were grieving yourself, but you were carrying that load also for 5 little people.
It was an extra grief in that Chris's children had to go. We had his 2 oldest children live with us full time, and the youngest one lived mainly with his mum, and she lived in Bundaberg at the time. So unfortunately, the 2 oldest ones, unfortunately I say for me, it's a bit selfish, they had to go to be with their mum, obviously. So they were gone. So I went from having this chaotic household filled with, you know, 3 to 5 children at any given time, to this house with pretty much just me and the cat and my 2 children for most of the time. So it was incredibly quiet. And I remember feeling guilty about all the times I had told the children to be quiet. You know, you go through, and I recognise now that's very normal, that we go back and we go, well, why did I think that was bad, or why did I think that, and, you know, guilt is a wasted emotion and it's silly. But you do sort of think, wow, this is quiet. It was, I think, and I read a post yesterday, somebody saying about how Sunday nights were terrible, and everybody sort of has their time where they feel it the most acutely, and evenings is usually particularly terrible. So it was, but I'm a fixer, which is not always a good thing. You know, I want to do all the things that I have to do to make it better and make it right. And so I wanted to listen to all the podcasts, read all the books, go to all the therapy, do all the things, and then I would be fine. No, absolutely. That's how that works, isn't it? You know, I'm a type A. I do things. We can do hard things, all of that. I was very much a poster child for all of that. And off I went on my busy way to fix myself and heal myself. And I think I was doing a very good job of basically ignoring. And COVID hit.
Oh, gosh, yes.
And I got put back inside to sit down and deal with my grief. Thank you very much. You're not going to busy it away, madam. You are not going to join a group here and do a thing over there and busy this horrible feeling away. You're going to sit at home and deal with this. And that I did. And it wasn't pretty. It wasn't pretty.
No, it's brutal. And it's brutal having to do it anyway, let alone when you're kind of almost forced to.
Yeah.
You know, that it you know, should come in its own time. What did you find helped most in that time to kind of process that grief in a, you know, very singular bubble?
Gratitude. And I know this sounds terribly cliche. We did have a gratitude journal, the kids and I, and we used to sit each night. We adapted it a little bit. We did, you know, people we were grateful for, things we were grateful for that day, and those sorts of things. And what gave me a moment of joy that day. We would sit and write those things, and that's been lovely actually to look over now. And I just sort of purposely reframed the way I looked at things. I lived on acreage at the time, and so that was a big upkeep. I had to learn how to use the ride-on mower. I had to do all those sorts of things. But then I looked at it, well, aren't I lucky that I get to go out and ride on this mower over, you know, 3 acres when people are cooped up in apartments? And I don't often use the term silver linings because, I don't know, it sounds a bit like that toxic positivity. I'm not into that either. It's just about how you see what it is differently, and it doesn't mean you're not allowed to say that it's shit.
Absolutely.
Because it is, a lot of the time it is, but it's just about looking for those moments and holding on to them. And I did that, and I really came back to what's important to me, and then I sort of grieved me as Chris's wife during that time as well. Like, I didn't just grieve the loss of him, but the who I was, because I think in that period afterwards where you are doing all the things and, you know, people say, oh, you're so strong, and you want to go, well, what do you want me to do? Like,
the other option is to fall apart. Yeah, not be strong.
Well, bills still have to be paid and lawns still have to be mowed, and that doesn't make me strong. I'm just out here doing it. So, but I think you do discover a lot about yourself in that moment, and that's where you sort of rebirth that new version of you. And in a way, whilst that's a positive step forward, it still comes with its grief of, I'm not that same person that Chris fell in love with. He doesn't, if he were to walk in here today, he actually doesn't know this version of me and what I've been through.
It is such an interesting concept, and it's probably one of the most difficult ones, I think, sometimes to get your head around. Like, I am different. Would they recognise me? I mean, physically, yes, but all the things that happen post, you have that before and after, and it's quite confronting at times too.
It's very confronting, and the reconciling of that, I think.
Yeah. How did the relationship evolve with you and Chris's kids, your stepchildren?
I'm very lucky in that their mum has allowed me to have involvement in their life. So, they did move to Bundaberg, and that was by no stretch an easy time for any of them, and for her as well. At the funeral, we did some wonderful things I'm so grateful that the funeral director was very inclusive of the children in the service. She had teddy bears on the coffin with letters that I'd encouraged Chris to write, and the teddy bears were holding those letters. She had them on the coffin, and I invited their mum to sit with me at the front, because I felt like she was still, she didn't get to have that grieving widow status that I was getting, but she was the mother of his children, and she deserved a seat there to be with her children as they were navigating all of this. And I'm very lucky that I've driven to Bundaberg quite a few times to spend time with them. They have come down here to visit me, stayed with me. I went up, not last year, the year before, for my oldest, her 18th, and graduating grade 12. I got invited to the formal pre, and I got beautiful photos. Incredibly confronting and upsetting, just that, thinking how proud he would have been. And I'm still in touch with them. So
that's amazing, because it doesn't always happen.
It doesn't, no. I'm very, very fortunate. In the two younger ones, they have moved overseas at Christmas time. Their mum has taken up a job overseas, but she keeps in touch. She sends me emails, and of course, so my oldest one is living on her own with her partner in Bundaberg. And I went up just a few weeks ago, and I spent the weekend with them, and it was really lovely. She's an adult now in a house, and all of that. So it was really beautiful to spend the weekend with her. So
that's so lovely to hear. Now, Claire, you have remarried, and you've joked about collecting husbands. Can you tell us about meeting David?
I can. I say, I have an ex-husband, a late husband, and a current husband. So, but yeah, meeting David, wow, it was a rocky journey to get there for anyone who has navigated dating and relationships in widowhood. Look, you've got to approach it with a bit of a sense of humour.
Always.
And also not assuming that it's going to be a fix, because that's absolutely not what it is. If anything, it throws in a whole other, I would say I'm levelling up with my grief journey now, because I'm having to understand and appreciate new aspects of my grief that I didn't know existed. And that's the journey. You hear lots of people say that it's not linear and it's not a straight line, and that's all sort of lip service until you're in it and you're saying, no, it's not. And one path doesn't just end and another one begins. That might be what you see on social media, but there's a lot of ugliness in between that. So, I mean, I spoke earlier about becoming the person that I became after Chris died. I also then chiseled myself into a different version after dating for a little while as well. That's eye-opening. So the version that met David, she was well damaged, you could say. She was damaged, but she was enlightened and she was very aware and very insightful, I think you could say. But yeah, there was certainly a lot of trauma and a lot of funny stories that got me to meeting David. And yeah, I met him on Tinder. So it's...
Where you never thought you would ever be at any point in life.
I didn't. But, you know, the funny thing is about you saying that, and I hear a lot of widows say, you know, I never thought that this would happen and I never thought I'd have to do this and it's not fair and this shouldn't be me and I should be with my husband. But you're not. So... There's an element of you sort of have to draw a line there and say that's not ever happening, so you can't romanticize that. And I remember reading a book, I don't know if you read it, called Option B by Sheryl Sandberg.
Oh no, I haven't read that one.
And it was really, really good. It was very pivotal for me. And I remember something she said in there was... it was to do with her son not getting the dad there on a school thing. And he said, you know, I don't have my dad here. Everybody else has their dad, and he had his uncle. And she said something to the effect of, well, that was option A. And we don't have option A, but we're sure as hell going to play the hell out of option B. You know what I mean? It's not there. So we can't lament for too long about what's no longer there. And it was never rightfully ours forever. Nobody ever said that we were going to get that forever anyway. So it might feel not fair, but it is what it is.
It's so...
as blunt as that sounds.
No, it's a really fair line, absolutely.
So I think meeting David in that sort of moment, I didn't resent having to do all that dating. I didn't resent that path that I was on. I was on it. I was learning. I was open to learning. And along came David.
How wonderful. So you have a very full dance card, you know, technically 3 husbands.
Yes.
A whole lot of grief, a smattering of children. Did David bring children to your marriage?
He did.
Oh, goodness. How many more?
Yes. My son always jokes. My son is 17 now, and he jokes that if he meets someone new and they ask how many siblings that he has, he says it's complicated.
That's beautiful.
So David has 2 beautiful daughters. They are a bit older, so they are out of home now. So there's just the 2 under the roof at the moment. So, yeah.
That's fabulous. And how do you make space for your life with David and Chris?
Well, David allows me that, but I've also never apologised for it. In what I said before, the person I am to David, I am because of what happened to me or happened to us or I went through, however you want to phrase it. So the version of me that he loves is this way because of what I have navigated. And I'm sensitive to, you know, David's thoughts and feelings around it, especially in the beginning of our relationship. You know, I had to tell him on the first date, and I'll tell you a funny story because after I met David on the apps, as they say, of course I did my due diligence and stalked him like a good FBI agent, as we do.
Indeed. But
finding a middle-aged white man called David on social media.
Needle in a haystack.
But I found him. And when I found him on Facebook, I noticed that we had like 13 mutual friends. Oh. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. Hang on a second. And as I went through, I noticed that all of the friends were people that I had known in the triathlon club that I had met Chris. And I thought, oh, that's really interesting. And so I started scrolling through his page, and you know how you can see the photos that aren't private and the ones that are, I'm sounding like a real stalker here, but I'm sure people can relate.
Oh, yeah.
And my heart actually stopped as I came to a picture where Chris and David are in the same picture as they were training for a half Ironman event together with the triathlon club.
Oh, Claire.
And I thought, oh my God, I cannot believe this. And I didn't recognise him. I couldn't place him from those days when we were in the club. So, of course, I had to admit to David on the first date that, A, I'd been stalking him, and that, by the way, do you remember my dead husband?
Yeah. Awkward opening line, but, you know, different.
And look, he hung around, so I thought, you know, you might be all right. I haven't scared you off with either of these tactics. And David is the most beautiful, open, honest, vulnerable man that you will ever have the pleasure to meet. So having those sorts of conversations with him were just very natural. I hear some widows say, you know, oh, my new partner's sort of jealous and won't let me have photographs, or David it was just never like that for him. He just accepted that Chris was a part of me, and whilst, you know, I don't have pictures up in the house of Chris, I have his ashes out the back in a rosemary pot, which moved with us to our home here, and it has the rock, and David's the one that looks after it. He waters it. He's been known to pour him a couple of beers. I think he goes out there to chat to him sometimes when he's maybe annoyed with me. And he very much accepts that Chris is part of that journey. Didn't end, that didn't stop when I met David. It continues on, and it just continues on differently.
Claire, you find yourself, it sounds like, in a really beautiful place, and for that I'm very, very grateful and happy for you. To round out our chat today, I'd just like to ask you 3 final questions, which I'm asking every guest. What do you like to do to remember Chris? Is there something special that you like to do just to mark his memory?
There isn't. No, there's not a one. We're not sort of ceremonial type of family. I use the term speak his name. I continue to speak about him. I continue to speak about the importance of palliative care and about widowhood in general, and take the stigma out of death and dying. And I think that is how I choose to remember him.
And leading on from that, what is something that you say or you have said to someone who's newly widowed? Just some advice. I think that's always the hardest thing. Yeah.
Being the pragmatic person that I am, I usually say in those first few days and weeks, find water. It is nature's great healer. Drink it, bathe in it, swim in it, shower and cry in it, or sit by it at the ocean. There's something about water that will bring you into the present moment. And it's just it's a solid thing that you can do, and I just say that.
Oh, I love that. Oh, I really love that. Thank you. And finally, is there a quote that resonates with you most at this point in your journey?
You don't get over it, you grow with it.
Very nice. Claire, it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you for sharing your story with such warmth, humour and courage. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you to all my guests for sharing their stories so generously. The Widow Diaries is hosted and produced by me, Caroline Winter from Pod Talk, for First Light Widowed Support, which provides information, resources and connection for young widowed people throughout Australia. Follow or subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode, and you can also find out more information at firstlight.org.au. This podcast acknowledges and celebrates the traditional custodians of the land and waters on which stories have been told for thousands of years and on which this podcast is recorded.